Welcome to another painting tutorial with Daft Painter. Today I'll be showing you how to paint the new Ogroid Myrmidon by Games Workshop. It's a great model with plenty of detail to work with. I'm going to be doing some different colour transitions on the skin for this one. Like with all of my miniatures, I've primed this one already. I use a grey primer. I always find it's easier to work up and down in tone, and it doesn't really matter what brand you use for it. I will be starting off with Tuscarora fur for all of the flesh. I'm going to do a more reddish fleshy scheme as opposed to the whitish one that's present on the box. I felt the colour scheme was a bit too old and gauntly. I wanted a more vibrant palette, so I'm doing 2 thin coats of Tuscarora fur to begin with. Before we do any other parts of the model, I'm going to go straight into the colour blending on his chest. I take Kislev flesh and cover the parts I want to be a lighter colour. I've picked his stomach and torso on his front. This will be blended over many shades of colours, and I choose to do this before anything else because it's quite hard work to work around other details that you've already done. It's good to have a base to go on before you get shading and highlighting too. The next colour I use is khaki from Game Colour, but you can start mixing Kislev flesh and Tuscarora fur in various different blends if you prefer. I paint this with short brush strokes going the direction of the muscles. I don't want any defined lines of paint on this. This will start to transition the colours together, and don't forget to just do this on the edges of the Kislev flesh you've already painted. Now I mix Tuscarora fur and Kislev flesh in a 50-50 mix, and do the same technique again to transition the colours further. Quickly, I put a small amount of Tuscarora fur on the brush just to dab the edges to clean up the blend. This will help it make it look smoother and even across the body. I also do a second layer of Kislev flesh to firm up that colour in the middle. I decided I wanted to blend a bit on his spine and his mane, so I mixed a tiny bit of black in with Tuscarora fur and drew it down from the spine. I think the darker back and lighter front will give a great contrast to the model overall. Then I add even more black to the mix to do the parts closest to the spine and to the hairs. While I have this black out, I'm going to paint all the leather straps he has. Go really slowly with this and make sure you get all of the edges of the straps that just touch the skin. This might take a while to do carefully, but it's a lot faster than covering up a mistake on the blend you've already achieved. I like to get the base colours done first on any model, before I do any washes or highlights. You have your own way of doing things, that's fine, but this is what I like to do. Next is Retributor Armour to paint the shield. It will get washed with Agrax Earthshade from Citadel paints later, so that will give it a more brassy tone. Continuing with the base colours, I'm using Gunmetal from Game Colour to paint all the other metal areas like the spear and the joiners on his leather straps. For the horns and linen wraps, I use Ushabti Bone from Citadel Paints. However, the loincloth in the middle is going to be done Kislev Flesh rather than this colour. I use Earth from Game Colour for the wooden handle on the spear, but for this any brown you have will work fine too. Here's that Kislev flesh I was talking about on the loincloth. After some thought and overview of the colours going on here, I decided the hair would look cool if it was a black to grey transition rather than red, so I base coat all of the hair black. The reason I like to get all the base colours done is because it makes washing so much easier. This model only needs Agrax Earthshade, and it needs it all over. Try to push the wash into the crevices, but don't worry too much. If you want to be safe, add a little water to the wash and it won't come out as strong. Then you can reevaluate if this is what you want on the model, or you could just do line shading from there. Washes can take an hour to dry sometimes, so make sure all the nooks and crannies have dried before you do any more painting. We're going back to Tuskor fur to go over exposed areas of flesh like the bumps of his spine, his shoulders, kneecaps, and anything that the light would catch that isn't already a lighter colour. Now I've mixed just a drop of Kislev flesh with Tuskor fur in a 3:1 ratio. This will go over all the parts we just did to build up that highlight. Now back to Kislev flesh to lighten up the pecs and abs. I also go over the veins and scars in this too. I use flayed one flesh on the exposed muscles and just the edges of the torso area, just to make it pop out a little more. To highlight the straps, I used Mechanicus Standard Grey. This is one of the most painstaking parts, but it can be very rewarding afterwards. Just take your time when you edge highlight and do it as slowly as you can. If your hands start to shake, try pressing the bottoms of your palms together while you hold the model. This helps steady your brushstrokes. While I have this grey out, I also paint lines down his hooves, making sure I leave the very tops black and don't coat the entire thing in grey. I also use this grey to dry brush the tips of the hair. Use a medium dry brush if you have one, but I'm using a large because my medium has gone missing, so I need to be a bit more careful with my strokes. Now with Administratum Grey, I did the bottom of the hooves in small lines. I also do the tips of the hair in this again, but lighter than the previous dry brush. Try to brush towards the end of the hairs more and more with each lighter colour you do. Lastly, I do a little bit of Ulthuan Grey on the hair tips. I want to make a little more shine and transition to the steel metal, so I'm using Runefang steel to highlight all the raised surfaces of the metal, such as the edges of the spear and the tips of the spikes. I also edge highlight the spikes on the shield and around the trim of it to make it look more metal and worn. I use Ushabti bone to edge highlight the loincloth and the wraps around his arms and legs. Then one final edge highlight of flayed one flesh. Lastly, I dot the eyes where Flash gets yellow, and an even smaller black dot in the centre for the pupils. If you have trouble doing this, I would recommend using a cocktail stick with just a little bit of paint on the end. That works too. And he's done! I really enjoyed the blending work on this one, and I hope this helps you with some fleshy transitions on your models. I think he came out really well, but let me know in the comments what your thoughts are, and if you have any questions on anything you saw in this video. It would mean a lot to me if you liked and subscribed, as I really enjoy sharing my work with as many people as possible. I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you next video.